All right, welcome in everyone. I'm going to make sure that I actually am live before we get started today. Okay. Let's see here. Wonderful. All right. Well, let's get started. Welcome to my channel. I'm Josie Warren, the autoimmune expert. And before I go into our topic for today, I want those new viewers to learn a little bit more about me. And I want you to know that 10 years ago, when I came to where I work now, a New Life Center, I had 8 autoimmune diseases, conditions like Hashimoto's, MS, CVID, rheumatoid arthritis, and I had been developing autoimmune since I was 16, since 6 months after my dad passed away. And after years of alternative medicine and Western medicine, of medications and IVIG infusions, supplements, food diets, I continued to get worse. And I had the awareness that what I was doing wasn't working. So if the solution for me in my healing wasn't going to be in Western or alternative medicine, where was it? And that's what led me to a New Life Center, where I learned that the real root cause of all of my conditions was my emotional state, my emotional overwhelm as a woman. When I resolved my emotional overwhelm, within 3 months, all of my autoimmune diseases permanently healed. I'm 10 years healthy, not in remission, and that's where I take my students. We go beyond remission into the true and permanent healing of both autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses. And that takes me to the topic of today's video. The title of today's video is Why 80% of Autoimmune Diseases Happen to Women. The truth. Now, this video was inspired by an interview, an individual named Mel Robbins, an interview that she had with a doctor named Dr. Sarah Sauls, formerly known as Gottfried. And just a little information, Mel Robbins, she's a very famous podcaster, New York Times bestselling author, a thought leader. And Dr. Sarah Saul, she is a MD trained both at MIT and Harvard, and she is the author of the New York Times best-selling books, The Autoimmune Cure and The Hormone Cure. And in this podcast, which is on YouTube, they're trying to answer the question, Dr. Saul is why 80% of autoimmune diseases happen to women, and why autoimmune diseases are 4 times more prevalent in women than men. And so here's what Dr. Saul said, that she believes it's the socially constructed gender differences that are placed on women, meaning that women have higher stress, that we are caregivers, we're overprotective, and we don't feel seen, we don't feel heard in our life. She also went on to say that we don't have a good skill set of saying no, and that women also have a lot of stored trauma, higher rates of trauma, and they get higher rates of PTSD compared to men. So that was her perspective. Again, an MIT, Harvard-trained doctor telling us that she believes very definitively autoimmune diseases are more prevalent in women because of being a woman. She goes on to say that she believes there's something wrong with our environment, that to be a female is a health hazard. Let me say that again, that to be a female in our culture is a health hazard. And that this is why autoimmune diseases are increasing in women. It is what, quote, what has happened to us that is causing the civil war in our body. So before we go in and completely dismantle this belief system and what this doctor said, can I just first say that coming from an MIT and Harvard trained doctor, what she's sharing right now, it seems unquestionable because of her credentials. But this very belief system that we as women are getting autoimmune diseases because we are women, and the social constructs put onto us of the patriarchy, that this actually places us straight into what we call camp victim and then right into autoimmune diseases. So this problematic message actually is the reason for autoimmune, and we will talk about that later in just a bit. But I know this from my own experience. I know the dangerous message this is, being told that being a female in our culture is a health hazard. Because growing up as a woman in this world, I was fed by our society at the youngest age that I can remember that because I am a woman, my life would always be harder. That being a woman was a lifelong disability that I could never escape. That as a woman, my experience and that my basis of survival would be built on struggle, clawing my way up this slippery mud hill that men naturally resided on. That my life was going to be a life of caretaking and caregiving, that I was going to have to always watch out to being taken advantage of, that I was going to have to get used to being invisible in our world and feeling unsafe all of the time. I learned very early on that the role of woman is a role of victimhood, of trying to survive against everything happening to me, and that there is nothing I could do about it. This was the plight of being a woman. And eventually, I attended a very liberal arts college, was surrounded by post-women's lib professors, female professors, who indoctrinated me into this idea that the world would try to objectify me even with my college degree. And with my college degree, the workforce would always still be against me. That being a woman was an oppression that I needed to actively fight against. And that as females in my college, we gave up our bras. We did. We stopped shaving. We had awareness rallies and marches on campus. Again, feminist movements and marches. And I lived in perpetual fear of my inability to have both children and be a mother and have a professional career, and the struggle of being a woman and that plight and the fear I had of my life because of the gender I was born, it consumed me and it consumed my female friends. I drank all of the Kool-Aid and I believed it as truth. And I felt cut at the knees even before my adult life had began. Now, the message of Dr. Sarah Godfrey that it's a health hazard being born as a woman in our culture, and this inequality and this false concept of gender differences, and then my own journey as a woman through these social constructs, this led me deeply entrenched into camp victim and also into a life of autoimmune diseases that I'll talk about in a little bit. Now, why as women do we choose to be entrenched in camp victim? Why do we choose to live in a false reality that we are oppressed in our society, again, in 2025? Well, in camp victim, we want the excuse that being a woman provides. This ironclad, it's a lifelong excuse that we can pull out at any time. So we don't really have to try in our lives. We don't really have to go for it in life. We don't have to go for it to fail, to get back up, to be seen. So instead, we play the woman excuse card. We hide under this guise and protection of the story our society has woven about the oppression of women. It's the perpetual why I can't. And again, fill in the blank. So why we can't in our lives? Well, because we are women, which again couldn't be further than the truth from the truth in this modern age and in this modern world. We want to blame as women rather than try. We want to be victims. It's easier. It is the easy way out. Being a woman is the perfect cause to fight against for the rest of our lives. Now, this is the definition of camp victim. So to answer the question, why 80% of autoimmune diseases happen to women? The truth is, it's actually our belief in what Dr. Sarah Godfrey shared in this podcast, believing what she says to actually be truth, that being born as a woman in our culture is a health hazard. This belief puts us right in the middle, entrenched in camp victim, where all autoimmune diseases are created. Now, the real reason why 80% of autoimmune diseases happen to women is a direct result of the feminist movement and the Me Too movement that has put us and pitted us against men, believing that we live in a society that is rigged against us. It has made us into victims and pushed us right into a perpetual experience of camp victim. That the women's movement and the Me Too movement highlighted this false narrative that we are oppressed and that we live in a patriarchal society that is against us. So how does camp victim, feminism, and the Me Too movement and buying into this false narrative of female oppression in a patriarchal society, how does this cause autoimmune diseases? Well, believing in this false narrative, in again, 2025, everyone, that we as women are oppressed, that being a woman is a health hazard, it creates a constant feeling inside of us of not being in control of our lives, of living in fear of life, and not feeling safe as women. That we feel that we are powerless to these false oppressive forces of society and of men. And it's this false narrative that creates a very unique experience that only women have. Again, coming from that feminist movement, that Me Too movement, and again, birthing, I remember this feeling, a chronic state of fear in my life, no matter where I was, fear because of the unchangeable fact that I was born a woman. And so what happens is that we end up living all of the time on an emotional edge, fearful of life and living in uncertainty. This emotional edge becomes the lens that we see all of our life through and our life events. So what happens is when normal life stressors occur, stressful life events, we perceive them as traumatic because we're experiencing these normal stressful life events through that lens of the emotional overwhelm and living on the edge. And so perceiving normal life events as stressors, as traumatic, this pushes us over the edge emotionally. Again, perceiving normal life stressors as traumatic pushes us over the edge emotionally. And what happens, this is going to be the shift into the physiological breakdown that causes autoimmune diseases. What happens is that perceived trauma overwhelms our nervous system and it activates the fight or flight response. Now, fight or flight is a mechanism that's very critical to us as humans. It's only supposed to be activated for up to 2 hours. But the problem is with us women, again, influence, living in fear, living on that emotional edge, and then perceiving normal life events as traumatic, that fight or flight gets activated, and then it becomes chronically locked on. Why? Because it reads the constant state of fear of life, powerlessness, and overwhelm that we live in as women, again, created by this false narrative of oppression. It reads it as a real and actual threat. And we get stuck. We get stuck in chronically activated fight or flight. And this is where the creation of autoimmune diseases and our symptoms occur. So stuck in chronically activated fight or flight in the sympathetic nervous system, our body releases a constant influx of cortisol, a stress hormone. What that does is it wreaks havoc on our female hormones and also our metabolism. So not only do our hormones get dysregulated, but we have a lot of issues with weight gain and our weight. Now, for all the autoimmune people, this is very important. What also happens stuck in chronically activated fight or flight, our immune system becomes dysregulated. It starts attacking the very tissues and organs it was designed to protect. So, for example, with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, that overactive immune system is attacking the thyroid gland. This is the creation of autoimmune diseases right here. This is where they're coming from. And also what occurs in chronically activated fight or flight is our digestive system becomes compromised. It stops working properly. So we as women get conditions such as leaky gut, food allergies, food sensitivities, candida, bloating, constipation. These are all symptoms of the body stuck in chronically activated fight or flight because of our emotional overwhelm, that we crossed over that emotional edge, and we're living in that constant state. So to recap the creation of autoimmune diseases in women, the real story here, first, it's believing the false narrative of the oppression of us as women in our society, which inherently pushes us straight into camp victim and creates a powerless feeling inside of us, and we live on an emotional edge. From here, what happens is normal life stressors happen, but they are perceived as traumatic by us because we're looking at them through that overwhelm and through that emotional edge lens. And this creates a nervous system overload, activates fight or flight. Fight or flight becomes chronically activated because of our emotional state, and hence we create autoimmune diseases. Immune system becomes overactive. So why do 80% of autoimmune diseases happen to women and not men? Men are not living in a chronic state of being fearful of life because they haven't been told that someone or something is oppressing them, that being a man is a health hazard. They haven't been told that is the society that will always be stacked against them, that there is a glass ceiling out there. Again, the narrative that's being fed to us as women since we were little girls. This is why 4 times more autoimmune diseases happen to women than men. But let's talk about the good news here. The good news is our belief. It is our belief as women is what causes autoimmune disease. That's what causes it. Again, going back to that Mel Robbins podcast, no, it is not what is happening to us in our environment. It is us. It is our belief system. And here's why that's such a good thing, that we become the solution, women. That the solution for us women with autoimmune diseases, or for those out there, those women out there who want to prevent ever getting an autoimmune disease, is to get out of camp victim, where we believe this false narrative of the oppression of being a woman, and of the patriarchal society and the world stacked against us, and enter into camp take responsibility. Camp take responsibility. Now, in Camp Take Responsibility, we learn that we are a product of our choices, not a victim of our circumstances. That we are a product of our choices and that we are empowered to be in control, always, of our emotional response to the challenges of life. We learn that life is safe and that we are safe as women and that we are in control of ourselves. We are in control of our life. We are in the driver's seat, truly. And in Camp Take Responsibility, what happens is we outgrow the false narrative of being oppressed as a woman. We realize that in the year 2025, the life I create as a woman is up to me, and that there are no forces trying to thwart my progress as an individual and as a woman. And that I am the only one that can thwart my progress and growth. That it's all me. And again, from this place, again, we take back our power, we take back our control, our emotional state resolves. We are no longer on that emotional overwhelm, and the body gets out of fight or flight, back to the parasympathetic, heals and self-repairs itself. Immune system goes back to normal, body back in homeostasis. It really is that straightforward. And I'm speaking about this from my own lived experience. As I shared in my late teens and 20s, I was so deeply entrenched in this false belief system that I had to fight against the patriarchy and that I was always at a deficit of being a woman, and that there were so many things I couldn't do or wouldn't be able to achieve, and that life was going to be perpetually unfair for me. Well, Needless to say, that emotional edge that I ended up living on because of this false narrative and the emotional overwhelm and powerlessness that came with that, body went to fight or flight, got stuck in fight or flight, immune system became overactive. And by the time I was 28, like I shared earlier, I had 8 autoimmune diseases, and they were all coming from me and my highly unhealthy emotional state caused by living in camp victim, buying into the feminist and the Me Too movement. So what happened? How did I heal finally? Well, I made the choice to move into camp, take responsibility. And I had to take a piece of what I call the humble pie, look around the mess of a life I had at that age and health, and realize it was because of me. That it wasn't because of men. It wasn't because of the patriarchy. It wasn't because of some kind of false oppression. It was only because I wanted to be in camp victim, and I had some very unhealthy behaviors and choices that made me feel really bad about myself. And when I made the choice to take the reins of my life again, to realize that I create the very life that I have, that I create my health, and how my health and life end up is solely because of me and in my full control, I was able to take back my power, resolve that emotional state, my body fully healed permanently, 10 years without any autoimmune diseases. No, I'm not in remission. My immune system is completely back to normal. I have no autoimmune diseases. I have no symptoms. I take no supplements. I do no food diets and take no medication. Again, it really is. It's coming from us. So to pull it back into that Mel Robbins podcast with Dr. Sarah Saul-Godfrey, can we see how dangerous this message that she shared is? Again, coming from an MIT, Harvard doctor that we could question, don't even have the opportunity to question because she shares it as truth. No, Dr. Sarah Saul-Godfrey, the being a woman and the environmental factors against us and the health hazard of being a woman is not why 80% of autoimmune diseases happen to women. 80% of autoimmune diseases are happening to women because we are buying into your very dangerous narrative, creating the emotional overwhelm, powerlessness that's creating autoimmune diseases. All right, so if you're out there and you're listening and you know as a woman you have an autoimmune disease or like me diseases and you're also entrenched in camp victim, it's okay. And you're ready to finally heal and you need a step-by-step pathway out, I have a course for that. It's called the Autoimmune Healing Program. It's the exact same course that I took 10 years ago, only much more refined. And what it does is a step-by-step online self-guided course that takes you lovingly from camp victim into camp taking responsibility, gets your body out of fight or flight and moves you from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system, where your immune system goes back to normal functioning and you permanently heal your autoimmune diseases. I also have a 13-week course for chronic illnesses. That's called the Chronic Illness Healing Program. It's a very similar course, also taking an individual from camp victim to camp taking responsibility into permanent healing. And if you are interested in either of those for yourself or a loved one, down below there is a link to schedule a complimentary consultation. It's going to be an application. Fill that out, and I look forward to getting back to you. All right, thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to